The dimensions of human experience categorized with the terms apocalyptic and eschatology are temporal dimensions. Apocalyptic and eschatology, however they're used, deal with time. Since meanings in language invariably derive from the social system of those using the language, whether it's words or sentences, the meanings of words of all human communication doesn't come from dictionaries and lexica. Lexica and dictionaries and concordances are not what give words their meaning. The source of the meanings of words, any words, is culture and social systems. Agreed?
Yes.
All right, okay. Well, since meanings in language invariably derive from the social system of those using the language, the presumed ancient meanings ascribed to apocalyptic and eschatology derive from and depend on the speaker's or author's social system value of time. How they view time. What meanings they give or find in time. In other words, the significance ascribed to time determines what native speakers might mean by eschatology and apocalyptic. Some years ago, Dr. Bruce Malina published an article in the Catholic Biblical Quarterly dealing with the perception and conception of time in peasant societies and in the New Testament. You'll recall, of course, that our blessed Lord Jesus was a peasant day laborer. The name of this article is Christ in Time, Swiss or Mediterranean? And let me tell you, it takes a licking, this article, but it keeps on ticking. Bruce Malina explains that his article was published because, to the chagrin of some of the organization's gatekeepers, he had been elected president of the Catholic Biblical Association of America, and his essay was his presidential address. Thus, Malina says, it bypassed the editorial gatekeepers of the journal, whom he says are, quote, still largely allergic to social scientific methods, end quote. Since its publication, the article has been largely ignored. Dr. Malina says it's difficult to say why exactly. Perhaps, he offers, the people whom it was meant to inform are incapable of understanding what it means to do cross-cultural studies, a task basic to biblical interpretation of an historical kind. The problem for the historically oriented interpreter of first century documents, like our 27 New Testament documents, well, there's a couple that are early second century, is to find out what an author said and meant to say to an original audience in the first century. We talk about this all the time. Before we start spiritualizing the text away, let's get what the literal sense is, what the author, the human author, inspired author, had in mind. What his audience would have understood. The literal sense comes first. As Malina explains at length in his article for the Catholic Biblical Quarterly that I just cited, the attitude of first century people towards time was very different than 18th and 19th century Germans and 20th and 21st century Americans. Their attitude towards time, our biblical ancestors in the faith, was remarkably present-oriented. An event that was about to happen was forthcoming. A sort of expanded present rooted in a process launched in the present. Think of it like this, like a woman giving birth. When you see so-called prophecy that talks about the forthcoming in the Bible, it's always like a pregnancy. You see the woman's pregnant, so you can tell from that there's going to be what pretty soon? A birth. So if some end were coming soon, that is only because of what was already underway in the present. Right.
Because everything has an end.
Well, that's fine. Everything has an end. But the point is, there's something going on now. And from that, we can see God, who's so, in Israelite understanding, is so involved in the here and now.
Everything is any minute.
Right. So get this, these are peasants, right, who are they don't have leisure time to sit around thinking about future times because they're scratching out subsistence level survival. So try to understand that when they so-called prophesy, it's not Nostradamus or Edgar Cayce. Can't be. It's always got to be something near. It's got to be like a child about to give birth. Like we've just planted the seeds. We know a harvest is coming, right? It's something already at process in the present. Therefore, prophets are experts of God's will for the here and now. And what Jesus is doing in Mark 13, and what Mark is writing in Mark 13, is involving what? The here and the now. 2,000 years from now?
No. No, not that long.
You seeing the problems here? If a bunch of German people or Western people from the 18th, post-industrial, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st century, read these ancient documents, do you think that these people, these European people, these Western people, might accidentally read their understandings of time with future orientation getting bigger and better back into these ancient biblical documents and misunderstand them and distort them? I think that's a good chance. As William Herzog has noted, prophets in Israel, quote, were not so much driven by a vision of the future as by confidence in the past. The past that had antecedently shaped their present and could continue to influence its forthcoming course. All that was needed was a leader like Moses or Joshua and a people oppressed by their rulers. You see what has happened? The exegetical eschatology of the 19th century imported German concerns about the future into biblical discussions, making apocalyptic and eschatology German theological terms that continue to haunt us even now.